Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again tonight with another video. The Thunder just beat the Lakers for the second time this season, beating them once again after being down by a big double-digit deficit in this game. Last game, down 26, come back to win. This game, down 19, come back to win once again. And the guy that led the whole thing the same way he led it last time, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a franchise player. He is a guy that I firmly believe, and as you watch these games, if you don't watch these games, please watch him play because you'll see it the way I do. Shai is going to be a guy that can be the best player on a championship team. He is the guy for us. And the more that you watch him, the more that I watch his game, the more his game continues to evolve. And it's reached a point where on any given night, Shai can be the best player on the court. Even in a game with Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook tonight, when his team needed him most, Shai was the guy that led the charge. 28, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. The Lakers were doubling him almost this entire game. Every time Shai touched the ball, they tried to force it out of his hands because that's how good he is. He was making his ridiculous sidestep threes that he has continued to make an integral part of his offensive arsenal. He's shooting like 53% on sidestep threes this season. That's a lot for a guy that some people decide to say had broken his shot at the beginning of the season because they never watched the Thunder game and didn't know what his shot looked like before. He doesn't have a hole on his offensive game. He doesn't. Whether it's shooting those sidestep threes, his ability to create, his ability to drive to the basket. There was one play in this game where Shai got past Avery Bradley, drove around Anthony Davis, got him on his hip, and finished over 3 Lakers, including AD and Russell Westbrook, AD who hit him in the back, and he got an and one. Made the free throw, finished off the 3-point play. There's nothing he can't do offensively. He shoots 3 super efficiently. He gets to the basket with ease. He had this like crazy high step Euro step through the lane. His scoop layup is unstoppable because he has such a large wingspan that he gets the ball so far away from defenders that you can't guard it. He pulled up from the logo. I'm going to show you a picture of where he pulled up from right now. He pulled up from the logo, the L on the Lakers logo in crunch time because he was feeling it and he drilled it. Avery Bradley didn't even think to step up, and he just took it, he drilled it, and I don't know if I've ever seen Shai so hype after that moment. Which is funny, because a lot of people, a lot of media talking heads, feel like Shai shouldn't be in OKC, that he wants out, or he's uninterested, or he doesn't like playing there. If you watch that play, or if you watch any of our games, you would realize that that's obviously not the case. If you watch that play, you definitely realize that's not the case. If you watch the play where, at the end of the game, when the Lakers threw 4 defenders at Shai to try and get the ball out of his hands when it was time to try and foul and force free throws, when Shai rifled the ball under the basket to Lou Dort for a dunk to kind of seal the game off. The Lakers did make it interesting, but ultimately to help seal the game off. And Shai high-fived every single teammate as they walked off the court, hyping them all up, hyping himself up. Just, it's so obvious how much Shai loves this franchise, how much he loves his teammates, and how much he relishes being the best player on the court in those moments, being the guy to lead this team, being the guy to spearhead our rebuild. He is the franchise player, and you don't know how, or maybe you do, but it feels amazing to know that as Thunder fans, as a Thunder fan, we have a guy that can be the franchise player. There were people last season that said Shai was a fluke because they didn't watch the games. They just looked at the stats and they're like, oh, that's not sustainable because I have a preconceived notion that's just wrong. And I would rather like die on this hill than appreciate good basketball like a lot of people for some reason decide to do. They were like, oh, it's only 35 games. They ignored the fact that Shai led the league in drives and he was super efficient on those. They ignored the fact that his 3-point shot looked sustainable. They ignored the fact that he had a ridiculous offensive arsenal, and despite not having a lot of help, a team that went on a 20-game losing streak without him, Shai led the Thunder to a 16-19 record last season. They thought it was all fluke. Some people said when Shai got his max contract extension that it was an overpay because they don't know basketball. And if you're someone that doesn't think that Shai can be our franchise player, you might not know basketball. This is an opinion I firmly have. He's going to be an all-star this season. If he's not, I'm going to raise hell because I think the league realizes what a mistake they made, and I'm glad in these 2 Lakers games, and especially tonight, Shai showed the world who he was, how good he is. Because on these big games, on these national stages, Shai is showing people how great he is. He is making himself one of the most recognizable and fun to watch young stars in the NBA, and people are noticing. I have people that are DMing me or adding me on Twitter saying, yo, bro, Shai is crazy because like they haven't watched him that much before and they're seeing him go out and single-handedly take down the Los Angeles Lakers a lot of times on his own. I believe it was on like the last 28 or so of our points in this game. Shai scored or assisted on 20 of them. It was him. It was all him at the end of this game. And it's phenomenal to watch. He's going to be an all-star. He could even be all-NBA this season because a lot of guys' scoring averages are down. And the way that he's playing after the first 2 games where he was kind of rough in those first 2 games, after those 2 games, Shai's averaging like 27 points per game outside of those 2 games. I'm not certain on that number. It feels like it. I think it's maybe more around like 26. Anyways, he's balling. He's going crazy. And a lot of people overreacted to those first 2 games. Oh, Shai's a fraud. He was overpaid. Oh, he's a no fans merchant. He only scored because there was no fans or whatever. And it's clearly not the case. He's amazing. I think he could be an all-NBA player this season. I think that's how good he is. And he is a guy that I think at some point in his career can win an MVP award. There's not a single hole in his offensive game. There isn't one. He could average about like near 30 points per game at some point in his career. I believe he's going to average like 27 points per game this season. I believe this is sustainable. And I think he's going to do so despite not having a lot of help. Can you imagine when like Dort's 3-point ball starts falling a little bit more? Or when he gets more spacing around him? Or when he gets a big that's a lob threat? Can you imagine how good he's going to be? It's amazing. He's doing all of this with a roster that's not that great. We're rebuilding right now. We're figuring pieces out. And there are a lot of guys who are still going to be here when we do get better. Josh Giddey, 5, 8, and 8. I thought he would have his first triple-double tonight. I predicted that. He was kind of close. Didn't quite get the points, and he was a little short on the rebounds and assists. But he had, once again, some phenomenal passes, including a pass from out of bounds, one hand, slung it over to the corner, hit Darius Bazley right in the shooting pocket, and he drilled a 3. It was amazing. He continues. Him and Shai are going to be such a good backcourt. They're going to be the best backcourt in the league, or at least one of them, at some point in the future, not super far away. Derek Favors had 10 and 11. He had a lot of clutch offensive boards, so shout out to him. 14 from Darius Bazley, who had a great first half. 17 from Dort, who, like I said, his shot still isn't quite falling yet. I think it will come back. Maybe not like phenomenally, but I do think that right now this shooting slump is an anomaly. I don't think this is truly who Dort is. And even though he struggled, he did hit a 3. He had a clutch dunk at the end, as I mentioned, and he hit the 2 free throws that ultimately sealed this game to make it a 3-point game that the Lakers would not come back from. 14 from Ty Jerome, who was a huge spark plug in this game. He was phenomenal at the end of the half. Kenrich Williams with 13 and 8. He closed out the game. He is an amazing role player that I'm so glad that we have. It was a great game. I know we're supposed to be tanking. I know the goal is to get a top pick. It is. But I can't say I don't enjoy when we get wins because I know how badly these guys want to get wins. I know they want to win every single game they play. They don't care about a draft pick. If the Thunder had their choice, if these players had their choice, they would win every single game rather than go get a draft pick because they want to win. They're competitive. And you see it in the way that they play. I'm happy that they got this win. Shai's a franchise player. He just is. And if you don't think so, or if you still think Shai's like a fraud of some kind, you either don't watch the games, you do watch the games, and you choose to lie to yourself, or you just don't know ball. So pick one of the 3. Moving on from that game, I'll talk about the rest of the games. We'll make this an after the buzzer video. The Pistons-Sixers game, once again, the Sixers without some of their important players in Tobias Harris and Danny Green. They missed them tonight, but they didn't miss them enough to lose the game, winning by 11 against Detroit. Like I said in my video yesterday, the Sixers' depth, this is the best depth that they've had on a team in a very long time. Embiid still isn't playing super well. It looks like he's continuing to fight through an injury. He only played 30 minutes in this one, when a guy like Tyrese Maxey played 45, he had 24 and 5. He was phenomenal tonight. Joel Embiid isn't even 100%. And Ben Simmons still hasn't played, and the Sixers are at the top of the East. They're just really good. The depth is carrying them right now. 16, 8, and 5 from Shake Milton. 20 points, like I said, from Tyrese Maxey. 23 from Seth Curry. 14 from George Niang, who has been phenomenal this season. 8 and 10 from Drummond. This Sixers team is deep, and I've always said that good teams can win when they're missing some of their best players. That's what they did tonight. And after this win, they're on top of the East. Cade Cunningham had his best game as a pro with 18 and 10. Still hasn't gotten the shot down. It's going to come along. He's not a bust after 3 games. That shot will come along. He's not going to shoot like, I think he's like 1 for 21 from 3 on the season right now. That's not going to last. It just won't. He showed a lot of flashes of why he is such a fun and intriguing player. In this game, Jeremy Grant had 27, 6, and 4. The Pistons just aren't very good, and the Sixers are really good. So that was the story of this one. The Celtics Heat game, I'll kind of just give you a couple numbers to explain how this game went for Miami, who did lose this 95-78, which looks like a score from like the 70s or like the early 2000s even. So in this game, the Miami Heat were up, the Miami Heat were up 6 at the end of the first quarter. In the second quarter, they were outscored 33-9. So their offense went ridiculously cold. And at the end of the third quarter, the Celtics were up, I believe it was like 14, 16, 18, something like that. I want you to take a guess how many points Jason Tatum had at the end of 3 quarters. I'll give you 3 seconds to guess. 3, 2, 1, 0. That's how many points? 0. He didn't have a single point at the end of 3 quarters, and the Celtics were up by a considerable margin. The Heat just didn't really have the offense. Tyler Hero, who's been scoring around 20 points per game, just could not score. He had 6 in this one, 6 for Kyle Lowry, only 13 from Bam Adebayo. They just really could not score tonight. And there might be some nights, the Heat, they definitely need to bolster the bench a little bit more. When Victor Oladipo comes back, that'll help out as well. But the Celtics, despite not having a good Jason Tatum game, got this win. Sometimes you've got to get ugly wins. It just has to happen. Tatum only had 10 points. He scored 10 in the fourth quarter. 10 for Al Horford, who's having a phenomenal year. You had 17 from Jaylen Brown, who was the leading scorer for the Celtics. 14 for Dennis Schroeder. 12 from Romeo Langford. 13 from Aaron Nesmith, who I'm glad they finally played. I like him a lot as a player, and I think he has a skill set that can help the Celtics through their issues that they've struggled with so far. I'm glad that Ime Udoka freed him. I would like to see him continue getting more minutes. And despite the Celtics having some, I think the reason it feels like the Celtics are much worse off than they are so far this season is because of the nature of some of their losses, like blowing that massive lead to the Bulls, losing in overtime multiple times. The Celtics are 4-5. They're like 1 game under 500. And it feels like they should be like 2-7 or something. Good win for them. You've got to get ugly wins sometimes, and beating the top record in the East, at least before this loss, it's a big win. Rockets and Suns, 18 and 15 from Christian Wood, not enough to beat the Suns, who won by 12. 14 from Jayshawn Tate, 10 from Şengün, 20 from Kevin Porter Jr., 16 from Jalen Green. A decent game. They scored 111. It wasn't bad. They just couldn't stop the Suns. 16 from Mikal Bridges, 16 and 11 from DeAndre Ayton, who had a great game. 27, 9, and 5 from Devin Booker, 9 and 13 from Chris Paul, who continues to put up crazy assist numbers. I believe at this point, he's averaging the most assists in his career. I know it's only like 8-7 games into the season, depending on which team you're talking about. Actually, no, like 8-9 games into the season, depending on which team you're talking about. But still, that's super impressive at his age. The Suns seem to be playing a little bit like faster paced. It feels like when I watch them play, not sure if that's exactly a stat, or maybe I'm just kind of misseeing things, but it feels like they're playing faster. And I kind of like that for them. They have a team where they can catch and shoot threes. They should kind of be running. A lot of these guys are young. Ayton, Booker, Mikal Bridges, and even Chris Paul, who is a lot older by NBA standards. He can still run in transition, and he's a great transition player, so I feel like that is a style they should be going with, so I like that they're kind of leaning that way. Jazz and Hawks. The Jazz won by 18 without Donovan Mitchell, which is pretty big for them. The Jazz are legit. They just are. There are people that are going to continue to say that the Jazz aren't legit. That's just not the case. They're a very good team. When you win by 18 over the Hawks without Donovan Mitchell, it's a big win. 19 from Clarkson, 19 from Ingles, 30 from Clarkson, 23 from Bogdanovich, 13 and 15 for Rudy Gobert. They were just doing everything. Their defense is phenomenal. They have a great offense. They get so many open looks. It's ridiculous. And not even all of them have been falling quite at the rate that maybe they should be so far this season, like a lot of players in the NBA. The Jazz are terrifying. They are very, very clearly one of the favorites to come out of the Western Conference and even win the championship. People are going to continue to sleep on them, but this Jazz team is great. As for the Hawks, it was really just the story of they couldn't get any bench scoring. 21 from Trae Young, 13 from Clint Capella, 13 from John Collins, 14 from DeAndre Hunter. Yeah, I think Jordan Clarkson just barely got outscored by their entire bench, which is not good. You can't have that. And for a really deep team, they just couldn't get any scoring tonight. The Jazz defense, like I mentioned, is really, really good, but the Hawks have to be better. They're only 4-5 up to this point. And for a team that was just in the Eastern Conference Finals, disappointing start to the season, but I do think they'll turn it around. So those are my thoughts on the games. As I mentioned before, Shai's a phenomenal player, as really the story of the night. Let me know if you got to this point of the video by commenting below that Shai is a franchise player, so I know that you made it here. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all later. Real ones, it back.